everybody, to the Write or Die Show. I am your host, Randi-lee Boslaw. On today's episode, we are going to be talking to Dauna Needom. And I want to put a disclaimer at the beginning of this episode because we do discuss suicide quite extensively. And we also are going to be talking about domestic violence and domestic abuse quite extensively. So if that is an issue for somebody, maybe this episode is not for you today, or maybe you need to watch it with a loved one nearby. And I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware. And I hope that you do enjoy this episode because it is really great information. So thank you, Donna, so much for being on our show.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Tell us a little bit about who Donna is.
Donna is a 50-something-year-old woman who is embarking on a new journey in her life since she lost her husband last year. It was a long time coming, unfortunately, but I have 2 books out in the Better to Burnout series. One is My Days with the Dark Muse, and the other is Love is Worth Waiting For. One is a romantic suspense, which is Love is Worth Waiting For, and the other one is a very twisted trip of a guy's problem with addiction. So I also have a podcast called the Better To Podcast. And I'm just working on several different little projects and trying to reclaim myself and know myself again.
Oh, so. Reclaim yourself. I love the way that you said that. So what I hear when I hear reclaim myself is that you've lost yourself.
I don't want to say so much lost myself. My husband and I, and it's going to sound really twisted, my husband and I had such a connection that I would sit there and go, wow, my knee's hurting. And he'd be like, yeah, my knee's hurting. And as soon as he said it, my knee pain went away.
Wow.
And we could finish each other's statements and everything. So, I mean, we were really enmeshed. And I have friends that are intuitive. And yes, I do read cards too. And that's another thing. But I had friends that I took a picture right after he died. And they're like, I still see John on top of you. I still see his energy. And, we're 10 months out about. And now they're like, no, you're different. You have more energy. Your personality is different. And it's not that. The one good thing, or one point that my doctor made after my husband died, we had the same doctor. And she looked at me and she's like, I know you don't realize this, but you were carrying a lot of stress and anxiety for like the last 6 years, especially in the last year, because we had been told he was on borrowed time. So that, whether you know it or not, takes a toll on you. You just don't realize it. Just like nobody tells you that when you lose somebody of that significance. I mean, I lost my mom a long time ago, but when I lost John, because we were so enmeshed, we were together 16 years.
Wow.
About 4 or 5 months in, my nails became very brittle. My hair started to fall out. There was a lot of different issues that nobody talks about with grief. They just think, oh, you're sad. No, grief can physically affect you.
Yeah, so, that's a very good point.
And when I'm talking about reclaiming, it's like, my mom had told me, she's like, hey, well, she didn't tell me, but when she went through her divorce from my dad, she was eating a custard pie a day and eclairs, and she was very proud of the fact that she was an emotional eater. And, and so I had to make a decision last year to say, okay, John died. Do I eat my grief for comfort, or do I try to get healthy? Because I already know I have some health issues.
Yeah.
So I decided I'm going to take and get healthy. And now I'm 31 pounds skinnier than I was last August. So, and I still have a long way to go, but it feels good to be able to start, like I said, reclaiming yourself, reclaiming your identity.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful that you've been able to, turn something so sad into a little bit more of a positive thing. Not to say that the grief will ever go away, but you're dealing.
No. Well, and the thing is, there's days where everything is fine and all, and then, a song comes on the radio. Or you're taken right back to that moment, because he was in the car sitting next to me when he died the first time.
Wait,
and
the first time?
Yeah. Okay. So he died in the car with me, and then an hour later, they got him back at the hospital, and then he died in the ER, and then they brought him back again. And then he woke up. This happened on Monday, that he woke up Tuesday afternoon, was disoriented as anything, and he never woke up after that again. But come Saturday, I had to pull the plug. So technically he died 3 times.
Oh my goodness, your poor heart.
So the thing is, and I know you want to sit there and people can think I'm wrong for this, but I know what my husband wanted. When my husband used to get sick in the hospital, he's like, don't come see me. The
Yeah.
hospital is not a place. Just so during this whole week, Tuesday, I was at the hospital. By Wednesday, because Monday, Tuesday, that was the whole massive thing, I decided that I'm taking time for me. The
Yeah.
doctors and nurses understood. We're also going through COVID. So
Yeah.
I took a day for me and then I went back and I would make sure I took days for me. And the funny thing is divine intervention. He ended up passing Monday. So Saturday I pulled the plug. Sunday I was just like, I can't go in. I said my goodbyes. I can't go in.
Yeah.
Monday I'll go back in. Because they're like, it could be months he's gonna be on life, he'll be lingering. I'm like, all right. Yeah.
Wow.
So I woke up Monday morning and I took a Xanax because I'm like, I am just exhausted. I am physically exhausted. I woke up like 8 o'clock. 8:30, my phone rings, and it's the hospital calling me to tell me that he passed.
Wow.
So I was like, I think that was divine intervention of going, here's something to calm you down before you get this big slap in the face.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. Whoa. I was not expecting that because I did not see, I mean, I did not read the pre-interview questions thoroughly. I just sort of skim.
Well, I didn't really go into detail about that.
Yeah, I didn't see that. So wow, I'm just as shocked as everybody else who's listening right now.
Well, what's really weird is going back, I tend to write down my dreams. And what's weird is about a month before he died, I had this dream that was very similar. There was symbolism in it that played out very much like it. In fact, during the dream, the car that we were sitting in the place where he died, basically, got lifted up in a tornado. And I kept sitting there in the car going, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. And the
Yeah.
car got put back down and I was fine. And then we went to this big red brick building. Well, that was the hospital. So,
Oh, wow.
and here's the irony. My husband was a bad diabetic. The place where he died, because he thought I picked him up from dialysis and he thought his sugar was going low. So we went to Burger King to get him something sweet to drink, which is like maybe not even 5 minutes away from dialysis. And so he passed in a Burger King parking lot.
Wow.
Some irony there because, the bad diabetic.
Oh, my husband's diabetic, and now I'm like, I'm always on him about his sugar.
The problem with my husband is he would tell me when he first was diabetic, someone told him he lost 100 pounds, and someone told him, "So you want that donut? Just monkey with your insulin, pull your insulin." So that's how he learned to live his life. So he could still enjoy food. He loved cooking. He loved food. That was something he was passionate about.
Yeah.
So he learned how to play with it.
Oh.
And when we first got together, I'm like, are you taking your sugar? I don't need to. And he would tell me a number. So finally, he would get a meter just so he could prove to me. And he was always within 1 or 2 points.
Mm-hmm.
As his diabetes got worse, that wasn't the case. He was type 1.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So,
All right, so we're gonna shift the conversation now
I'm sorry.
away from that. No, you share whatever you feel you want to share. Right? You're the guest. You share what you feel is significant. But we're gonna shift a little bit, and I mean, some of your answers might come back to that because I want to know about your mental health.
My mental health overall is during all this. I mean, I've had a therapist before, and in fact, the day he passed in the car, one of the first calls after my friend came and got me and calling some family was my therapist. My mom, as crazy as she was after their divorce, even though she's stuffing her feelings, she made sure I had a therapist because I started acting out in school.
Well,
And
that's good though.
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, that's the funny thing is the irony here is my mother, who really could have benefited from having a therapist, never had a therapist. But throughout my life, I've always, because I embraced it at such a young age, I knew that it wasn't a bad thing to have a therapist.
That's good because that's probably one of the biggest battles for some people. I know that was a battle for me, was that I had to admit that I needed a therapist because by the time I went to one, I was an adult.
Right. Well, my husband, when his parents died, both his parents died, and he had several siblings, and his parents hadn't died yet, but his mom was really sick. She was terminally ill, and his dad was, taking care of him or taking care of her all the time. And the hubby was, oh, everything's going to be fine. And I'm like, you really should come to therapy with me. No. No, and back to the food thing. So I have my therapy appointment. I'm like, "Are you going to come in?" "No, I'll just sit in the car." He's like, I said, "You really should come to therapy." He's like, "Well, if you buy me a fish sandwich, I'll go." I'm like, "Okay, fine." And so I
I
bought
was
him
like a kid.
exactly. So I bought him the fish sandwich, and his parents passed, and we dealt with his family. When we got on the other side of it, he told the therapist and myself, he's like, "I'm glad I did. I'm glad I came because it made it much easier in the long run." And I think that's the problem. Most people, they're very they're very happy to take the pill because he was on antidepressants. They're
Mhm.
very happy to take the pill because it helps balance you out, but they never get to the root of the problem. He used to have night terrors, massive night terrors.
Oh.
And the thing is, if you're not dealing with all those emotions, if you're not talking to somebody that isn't a friend, I mean, you can talk to your friend about your problems all you want,
Mhm.
but they're not going to help you reframe it. They're not going to
Yes,
help you look at it.
exactly.
And that's why I think therapy, therapy is a great benefit. Especially if you notice that for me, because I'm older, I've noticed I've picked people in my life that are the same exact person like my mother. There's certain characteristics in certain friends that I picked up over the years.
Yeah.
The therapist gave me this great analogy of, well, you're walking down the street. You see a pothole. The first time you fall into the pothole. The second time you're like, I can make it through the pothole. It won't be a problem. You fall in it again. By the third or fourth time, you're like, I'm just avoiding the pothole. And it's true. I mean, you start recognizing that person as soon as you see them, and you're like, oh no, 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 no.
Hmm.
So,
That's such a great analogy. I love that pothole thing. And I'm
yeah.
picturing it like actually in my head as you're saying it.
Well, and so many of us do that without, because we were raised by certain people. We had friends that were certain way, and they may not have been healthy, but they were comfortable.
Yes. Yeah.
So
And
we're
we
used to it.
yeah, we have to break out of that comfort zone because just because it's comfortable doesn't mean it's a good place to be. Like I said, it doesn't mean it's healthy.
Right. Right. Exactly.
When was the first time that you noticed that you were dealing with depression?
Um, the first the first time I was dealing with depression, I would say I was 19, and I my self-esteem wasn't the best. My mom and I had a really tumultuous relationship, and she didn't want to know that I was in pain. I was writing, and I wanted to read her my writing, and she didn't want to hear it. Mind you, she had already tried committing suicide a couple of times before this.
Oh my.
um but you know I just moved through it. And same thing when she died. It was like I had my two small stepkids at the time. So I had to look at them, and I couldn't focus on taking time to grieve. Now, back to the pharmaceutical blends. So naturally, at the time, I'm living in a small town. I don't have a therapist because I have left my therapist because we moved from Dallas. And the doctor's like, well, here, try Prozac. Here, try this. And I can guarantee you that all they did, Prozac, I don't know if it was the Prozac or the other one, but one made me want to sleep all the time, and the other one made me want to eat everything in the house.
Oh.
So I finally just said, I'm not doing this.
Mhm.
And our dog was outside in the backyard, and we had a farm cat. And this cat had kittens, and we didn't know she was pregnant. And it was
Oh,
really cold. Well, call me naive. I'm 25, 26, 25. And Brandy, the dog, because this cat was the first time she ever had kittens too,
oh.
ended up digging a hole because it was rainy and cold, digging a hole and taking one of the kittens, putting it in the hole and laying around it to keep it alive. And
Aw.
that kind of made me look at life in a different perspective, because it's like, look, here's somebody that is not, here's a dog that is not a mother to this cat, but yet there's some beauty here.
Aw, that is so sweet. I love when animals do that. The only reason that I like to scroll on Facebook is to look for animal videos.
Yeah. I mean, there's something about animals that will encompass the human emotion so much better than us sometimes. So that
Oh, for
just
sure.
it kind of pulled me out of my depression at that moment.
That's
So,
so cool. And I want to point out here that when you were talking about medication, right? And one made you want to sleep all the time, one made you want to eat everything in sight, is that medication works for some, it doesn't work for others. So for anybody who's watched
right,
other episodes of this or read my books or whatever, they know that I'm on medication and it works for me. But for
right,
other people, it doesn't necessarily work. The other side of that is all the medications work differently. So if one doesn't work, you might need to try a few. So for my youngest, I think we had to try, I want to say like 7 different medications before we found one that worked. And now that he's on one that worked, like he loves it. Like he's like, I need to take this. I feel so much better. I can function throughout the day. So, if at first you don't succeed, try again.
Right.
But
And I mean, to go along with that, for me, but even regular, like if I take too much back medication, my mood starts tanking. And when I was diagnosed with fibro, they put me on Cymbalta. For
okay.
most people, Cymbalta's fine. I was on Cymbalta for 2 days, and all of a sudden, I'm sitting there going, well, my life's not worth living. I don't feel good. John would be better off without me. I've never had, I've never thought any of these thoughts. But because of my mom, it was like, wait a second, this isn't me. So it's not, some people can do wonderful on medication, and I recommend it. My husband needed medication. I don't fault anybody for medication. I'm not saying that. For me personally, though, it's a hard sell. I can't, anything, okay.
It doesn't interact with you properly.
Right. I mean, legally in Illinois, marijuana is okay. My
Same with in Ontario where I am.
So my husband was a medical marijuana patient, but we also had marijuana in the house, and I would make cookies. And if I have one cookie, doesn't matter which blend, if it's sativa or the other indica, I can take one cookie. If I have another cookie the next day, my mood starts to tank.
Wow.
And it's funny because I had a reader tell me when I was 19 years old, she's like, never get involved with drugs, you'll lose your mind. And I'm like, yeah, right, whatever. And I mean, it's true. If I take any kind like Flexeril for my back, I can take one. Otherwise, forget it. I will be doped up for days. It just stays in my system too long.
And so that's just so important for everybody to know that everybody's body works and reacts differently.
Exactly. 100% true. And I, like I said, if you need medication, take medication. And getting a therapist is also a good thing because besides the medication you have, that you're getting to the root of the problem.
Yeah. So let's talk about the root of the problem a little bit. Did you ever get to the root of your problem?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes and no, because I'm still unpacking some things that I didn't actually know about. For years when I would go to a therapist, I was always told that, you most likely were abused sexually as a kid. And I'm like, yeah, I don't recall this. I don't. Yeah. But yet when I've gone to meditate as an adult, certain things do come back up. Mm-hmm. So when I asked my dad about if he thought somebody could have done this, a certain person, he just railed about what he was ticked off about, took a day, and then came back and said, well, possibly, but I'm not sure.
Oh my goodness.
Like, okay. My weight issue, I think, had to do with a lot of, my mom, growing up with my mom, nobody knows what she was. She died when she was 41, so we're talking 1991. Nobody really knew what bipolar was. She was undiagnosed. And, she was the type of person that would sit there and say, you can do anything you put your mind to, and then turn around and say, you're going to fall flat on your face. So you never, and nothing was ever good enough. So I had her, and then, she was always threatening for me to go live with my dad. So that's another thing. It's like, okay, let me push you away. Yeah. She pushed me. I lived with my 5th grade teacher for several years. So I wasn't living with her. She went up to Shreveport. I lived with my grandmother, which was great. It was awesome. My grandma was great. But I mean, the whole fact was, and I had a girl in high school sit there and tell me, well, your mother must not love you, because if she did, you'd be with her. And a few years ago, I found a bunch of letters from around that time. And there was a letter from my grandmother, and it was all about, hi, I love you, da, 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 da. And there was a letter from when my mom was in Shreveport. And she writes this letter, and all it is barking orders at me about, make sure you're taking care of your grandmother, make sure you're taking care of your aunt, make sure you're doing this, make sure you're doing that. No, really, I miss you, I can't wait to see you, none of that.
Yeah.
Then on top of that, I have my dad, who, before they split, my dad was one of the best dads in the world. After they split, at 27, he decided he was a party man.
Okay.
And we went through numerous girlfriends. We went through him drinking a lot, riding in a car with him drunk. and him not showing up sometimes. And he swears now, he's like, oh, I never left you on the porch. And I'm like, I know my dad, he likes to spin the truth to make him the victim.
Mm,
So there's some truth that I don't necessarily believe that he was completely innocent. I'm sure there was one or two times when he was a little too intoxicated that he
yeah.
forgot to let me. So I think a lot had to do, I think a lot of my root to the problem is don't put me on a frickin' shelf and forget about me.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it comes down to when it really boils down to is it's a lot about self-esteem. And somebody posed a question to me recently. My dad's still alive, but somebody posed a question to me about 3 weeks ago and asked me, so who's your family? And I haven't seen my dad since 2009. And
Wow.
John was my John was my family. He was my hubby. He was my family. And I stopped and I thought about that question. It's like, who is my family? I would
Yeah.
say my friends mostly. I mean, family is who you make it, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
So,
I don't talk to my dad very often.
well,
So
my dad can't hear now, but what kind of started tilting when I started growing up and I started really analyzing, I started seeing him for who he was.
okay.
And after my half sister was murdered by her husband and he killed their kids too, my dad yeah, I'm not. We weren't very close. We had just reconnected our relationship because there was 12 years between us and two different moms. And when that happened, my dad tells me on the phone, well, that closes that chapter. And when he said that, I was just mortified. I mean, there was enough already that I was ticked off about him. But when he said that, I was just mortified. Like, how could you say that about your kid?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Me and my sisters are the same. We are, well, the same in age gap. I have one that's 10 years younger, one that's 12 years younger, and same dad, different moms. So
So
as
you
much,
get
yeah, I get it. They're still your family, even if there's that big gap.
right. Well, the interesting thing is, before my sister and I had my sister married a guy named John. Her wedding day was almost a year to the day of mine, to my second husband. And the funny thing was, my dad had had a heart attack in September. And because he had the heart attack, I reached out to her. So we reconnected. We hadn't talked in years. And we
Yeah.
reconnected and we were rebuilding our friendship.
Yeah. Wow.
So his heart attack actually, because if she would have died and I wouldn't have talked to her, I would have felt like crap.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, thanks, Dad, for having a heart attack, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. Well, sometimes you got to look at the bright side.
Exactly. That's what I'm doing right now, just looking at the bright side. But oh my goodness. And that's why domestic abuse is also such a huge issue,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and see, this wasn't the first time. I had a friend back in 2017, a friend that had been friends for like 20 years, and her husband apparently walked up behind her and shot her in the head while she was on the phone with her daughter and then killed himself. And so, I mean, I've seen gun violence. It's like, I have a friend who's like, I don't know anybody that has experienced as much gun violence as you and lives in suburbia.
Yeah. Yeah. You think gun violence, you're thinking like an inner city type
Yeah.
of community.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So you have a lot to unpack when you do go to therapy because I mean, yes, you're talking about this stuff, but that must have been such a traumatic experience to have actually went through.
It was. I mean, when my friend died, that was a huge shock because I mean, this was a friend that you could pick up the phone. You didn't have to talk every day. This was somebody you could pick up. You hadn't talked to her in a month or 2 months, and you're back where you were. When all this happened with my sister, it was like a week before Christmas, which even sucks even more. So it was kind of getting the rug pulled out. And then the fact that she had two small kids, I mean, they were, I think, 7 and 8. It was like, how could you do that to your kids?
Yeah, just
Much
baby.
less your wife. And apparently her mom was there. So her mom, she saw this escalate. Nobody really knows what happened. And I'm not going to pry. It's not my place.
Yeah.
But it's still, I don't understand why if your marriage is that bad, walk away.
And it's not an easy thing. And I want to point out for everybody listening and watching, there are, depending where you live, I mean, again, I can only speak from where I live, but there are supports available. Reach out to crisis lines, reach out to women's shelters. put a plan into place and keep yourself safe. I'm not saying that's an easy thing to do, but it's something that we want everyone to be safe.
Yes.
So make sure that you reach out to those organizations that are around, that are available. Reach out to your family that you trust to say, hey, this is my plan. Can you help me put my plan into action and keep yourself safe?
And I do have to go off on that one first. Not that the organization thing, but my mom was a prime example of that, because near the summer before she died, I kept telling her, I said, why don't you just leave him? Because he was very manipulative. Just leave him. Just come. I don't care if it's going to be tight. You can move in with us. No, no, no. So she was calling every day saying she was going to commit suicide. And she got to the point, this is how messed up our relationship was. She was going to shoot herself in the bathroom, in the shower. And she wanted me to drive from Dallas to Shreveport to come find her. And after 20 something days of hearing I'm going to kill myself, and after saving her years ago, she tells me this, and I'm just like, if you loved me, because this is mental abuse, it's downright mental abuse. I said, if you love me, you wouldn't ask me. You would not ask me to come find you. So I called my stepfather to tell him what's going on. And I'm like, you need to get the gun out of the house. When she moves up to Indiana, which was within the next couple of weeks, you need to get her help. Okay, I'll get her help. All right, fast forward to November. Guess what? The gun's still in the house. He didn't get her any help. He put her on an allowance of $5 a week.
Wow.
And, at that point, and this is where, find a way out. This is exactly what you're saying.
Wow, you have a lot of lived experience, a lot of various emotional roller coaster of a life, really. So wow, I'm definitely gonna have to put like a warning at the beginning of this episode. Yeah, disclaimer at the beginning. But thank you so much for sharing so openly about it all, because that's what we're here for, is that openness. So unfortunately, we're coming to the end of our time. It went so fast, this half an hour, that I can't even believe it. But where can people find your books?
DM Needom, NEEDOM.com. And also on Amazon and other book retailers. And that's the one thing I will say real quick, is all that tragedy though helps me write. So
looking at the positive, right? We've talked about that a lot, is looking at the positive. I think the overall theme of today's episode is look at the positive. We're changing perspective and looking at the positive through all the negative that is there.
Right. Always look at the bright side of life.
Exactly. And so are you on social media? Can people follow you?
Oh yeah. I mean, all my social media links are on my website. I'm on Facebook at DM Needom. And I'm also on Instagram at author/_DM Needom, and Twitter. Yeah. So, I mean, all my social links are there. On Instagram, if you go into my bio, they actually have a Linktree link, and I'm on TikTok. So yeah, I'm pretty much, and I have my YouTube channel, and I have a podcast. So there you go.
You're everywhere. And of course, I am going to have those links down in the description below. So be sure to check those out and follow Donna. And I always ask this question in every single episode, but what is something that you would tell people who are struggling right now with their own depression?
I would say, don't look at this moment as anything but this moment. Tomorrow is a new day. The next 5 minutes could change. You don't know. There's always possibilities. And I know sometimes it feels like everything is hopeless. Trust me, I've been there myself. But no matter what, if you keep going, there's always some mystery. Life is ebb and flow. And just keep going. And if you feel that you are so desperate that you can't survive, then reach out for help, because there is always somebody willing to pull you back.
Yeah, that is such a good point. And thank you again so much for being on the show, for sharing. This was a really great conversation, and the amount of heartbreak that you have went through, I can't even imagine, really.
But I've had great love, so it was worth it.
That is such a sweet way to put it. Again, looking at that positive side of things.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope everybody enjoyed that episode. It was a really heavy topic. I was completely shocked by some of the things that Donna has experienced throughout her life. And I just, again, want to say if you are experiencing some kind of domestic violence, domestic abuse, then please look up what crisis interventions are around in your area where you live, some women's shelters available where you live, and make a safety plan to get yourself, and if you have children or whoever else lives with you, making sure that you and those people are safe. All right. We just want everybody to live their best lives, their happiest lives. And if that means that you need to make some kind of an escape plan, then reach out to those crisis services that are available in your area. And remember that the only way to end the stigma of mental health is to speak openly and honestly. Bye.